So, this is my teaching philosophy. This is the larger video compared to the smaller one that you probably found on the prior screen. So I'm going to go through kind of this entire presentation so you can better understand my philosophy and what I was trying to achieve and kind of where I've been going with everything. So, to start, as a teacher, I really became one because I can't imagine doing anything else. Education really was my saving grace, and I want to teach students that there is so much more to education than they realize. I was told a phrase a long time ago that it is not enough to simply teach students to know. They must be inspired to learn in order to understand. And that's really stuck with me. So, to understand where that comes from, though, you kind of need to know a little bit about where I came from. So, if we're going to go into my origins of how my teaching philosophy came out, you need to understand there are four really large factors that played a role. The first was my socioeconomic status. I grew up in the lower middle class, which, while above the poverty line, was not really much of a comfort. Instead of drowning in debt, we were just barely flailing above water. If not for the support of my surrounding family, I'm really not sure my parents, sister, or I would be okay. So this played a really large role in how I viewed education and what I knew it could offer me given my economic status. My family, too, has always really been a complicated thing for me. My understanding of it has changed with my experiences between my parents' divorce, living with aunts, uncles, grandparents all under one roof, becoming part of two different step families, becoming honorary members to families and friends, becoming a part of the UW Woodring cohort family. The one thing that's really never changed, though, throughout is that the support I receive from these families has been just indescribably useful for me, and it's really been instrumental in who I've become. So that support is something I want to make sure that every student, every child really needs to have in their life. Another one, of course, is my education. I was really fortunate that my grandparents cared so much about my education. They advocated for my private school education, which is why I ended up attending a Catholic private school from second grade throughout high school. And the education I received during those years, while it did limit my choice of classes, really shaped my understanding of the world around me, and everything that I've done has been with this idea and this notion of just how important education is in the lives of everyone. And lastly, under my influences, I've had a lot over the years: music, cooking, traveling, hiking, camping, sports, video games, being in isolation, having depression, class discrimination, and so many more. I really took the bad with the good, but the most influential to developing my teaching philosophy has really been Dungeons and Dragons. And I know this sounds like a joke, but it's really important to understand because my philosophy is that I'm a DM teacher, a dungeon master teacher. I take into consideration the social and physical environment, the attributes each student offers, a mastery of the subject, and with the goal of being inspired to learn, I try to create a journey in which students can embody education and make it their own. And so the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary here, said, "It is you who will give form and content to all the universe. You will breathe life into stillness, give meaning and purpose to all actions which are to follow." And this really stuck with me. And it made me think about if I were to make education into thinking of the way it is like a game. My curriculum and my classroom are my maps. They're my way of understanding the physical and the social aspects of the world that my students have to participate in. And of course, the origin of this world is the subject. For me, it's English. For every teacher, it's their own. But what you bring to the class. And then there's the lore, the history of your world. And that really comes from your subject mastery. What do you give to the world? What do you bring into it with your mastery? How can you teach these students to better understand the way it works? And we've got your campaign, which for most games, it's the overarching campaign, what you're trying to achieve. And in this case, it's for your Common Core standards. What needs to be done? What boxes do you have to tick? What do you have to make sure these kids know and understand by the time they're done with this campaign, if you will, for the academic school year? And then you've got story arcs. These are your learning segments. These are the things you use to build up to the bigger ideas, the grander ideas, the ways that you finally achieve the end of the campaign by slowly guiding them through story arcs until they reach the place they need to be. And of course, you have quests. These are just your smaller lessons, your daily activities. Your side quests could even be extracurriculars and things, or not extracurriculars, extra credits and things like that. These are the other ways that they can enrich the world around them and better understand and get a sense of how your class works. Your enemies are assignments. They're just the stuff they do every day, the things they have to do in order to achieve understanding, to show that they understand. Your big bad guys are your finals, your tests, your quizzes, your larger writing assignments. These are the big ones. These are the ones that if they've put in the work, if they've done the quest, if they've beat the enemies, they are prepared to take down the big guy. And if not, it shows that they really didn't gain enough experience to do so. Now you've got your traps. These are kind of formal assessments. Formal assessments also apply to after you've leveled up or after you've beaten an enemy. But traps are really a clever way of kind of just a quick assessment to see where are they at, what are they doing, how are they doing. And it's really similar in games because it's a quick way of saying, well, did you prepare? Did you look? Did you even think to do this thing? And we've got exploration. And this one's really clever, but it's informal assessments. It's your understanding of how the student is navigating within your world, within your subject. Do they understand the ins and outs, the nuances, or there are certain areas you need to guide them to so they can explore it better to understand it better? You've got experience points, which are grades, and these are just students' way of understanding, engaging what their level of understanding is, where they can improve, what they need to improve on, and things like that. And of course, you got motivation, which is kind of universal throughout, intrinsic and extrinsic, just like in a game. You got to give the player something to fight for, something to motivate them to do these quests, to do these story arcs, to beat this campaign. And similarly, you got to give students something, whether it be something as small as little treats extrinsically for doing good on tests to the intrinsic idea of like, hey, let me just let you know like what you're doing, who you are has been incredible to learn and watch you grow and give them that sense of self-confidence. Now, storytelling and role playing is also a really big part. It's part of that journey. It's part of how you make it relevant, how you get kids to stick with it. They need to feel like this is as much their story as it is yours. And part of that is giving them roles to play and understanding how the student teacher dynamic works and what you can do with that. Now, the challenge rating, this one's very difficult. This is your academic difficulty. How do you set that bar? I mean, there are standards they have to meet, but how do you challenge them more? When do you challenge them less? And it can be a really difficult one to tell, and it kind of ties into that proximal zone of development. Like, how do you get them right within that zone so that they can do the best? And of course, you've got immersion, this relevance, this relation. How can they apply this to their lives? When will they use this in their lives? How can you make them see the value in what they're doing and learning so that they can apply it to themselves? And then back to this proximal zone of development, but on a bigger scale, the balance of all of this, of balancing the subject with the assessments, with the grades, with the motivations, with the quests, with the informal and formal assessments. I mean, it's a lot to balance all at once. And on top of all that, you've got character development. You've got the self-assessment of students to take in. And each student has academic achievement, academic growth, academic social growth, academic resilience, academic conviction, academic resourcefulness. I mean, students just have skills that aren't being measured in the proper way, but you have to account for it when you're putting all of this. If someone is growing well, but they don't have that academic achievement yet, how do we help them reach that goal? How do we help the classroom environment have a more social area? How do you help someone that's having such a tough time with something they're not good at? How do you build that conviction and resilience? How do you help them? And of course, there's still chance and free will. There are these X factors, these things you can't accommodate for, the things that you don't know what to do. And you can prepare as best you can, but at the end of the day, there are just things that happen in this game that you have to adapt to, and students will have to as well. So that's why I've really focused on combining everything the way that I have, because it's super important to know that I take this very seriously. But I like to look at it from a game perspective because it reminds me that students are people too. They need to have fun, they need to experience this. So while I want to give them the best experience they can, I need to balance it with what I need them to know versus what I want them to enjoy and understand about the world. So that was a lot to take in. But let me just walk you through the process because it's really just broken down to four really big key components. So the first is relationships. Establishing and building relationships is the first key to academic success, both as a student and a teacher. Each connection a teacher makes isn't to just a student in the class. It's a connection between one individual and another. And don't let the student-teacher power dynamic diminish that fact. You are still speaking to another human being, and they are speaking to one as well. Remind them that you're human. Remind them that you can have normal interactions, and that the only reason the student-teacher aspect is there is to remind them of the boundaries of these interactions, but it doesn't mean they can't have any. And next is your relevance. It's important that students understand why they are learning what they are learning, because if they can't connect their education to their lives, they'll fail to understand the true purpose of education. And for me, this is extra important because this is the kind of education that pays off long term. You might not notice it in the day to day, you might barely notice it in the year long when you look at your writing, but what you don't notice is how your thinking, your way of thinking, your way of analyzing has changed over the course of a year and how much it will change further down the road because of what you'll be able to do based on the building blocks you've gained today. And then there's understanding, because knowledge without understanding is like a language without purpose. Words hold no meaning unless they have a purpose. Likewise, knowledge means very little unless you understand what to do with that knowledge. And this is really big. It's important to understand that just because you might know a lot doesn't mean you understand a lot. And there's more to life than just knowing. You need to understand how the world works. And if you're going to succeed, if you're going to accomplish what you need to accomplish, it's not enough to know where to go, but understand how do you get to where you're going. And lastly, building off of that is empowerment, because empowerment is the path through which students will be inspired to learn, providing students with the tools, skills, and knowledge needed to succeed academically, combined with support to ensure students take risks and empower themselves. And this is huge. This is that moment where, birds teach their young to leave the nest. This is that moment where you teach them as best you can. You give them as many tools, as much confidence as you can to help them really succeed, to help them understand and go out into the world knowing that they can do everything that they set out to do. And so this kind of leads to my end goals. What's the point of my philosophy? Why do I do everything that I do? So for me, first and foremost, it's about the long game. Okay, life is a marathon, and the value of education is all around you. And education offers future opportunities you don't even realize now. And it's about understanding how to achieve the life that you want. And for me, that last part is the biggest. We all know that life is long. We all know that the education has value. We all know it can open doors, but it's really about understanding once you know what you want, how do you achieve it? Because my goal is that whatever you want in life, the only reason you should not be able to achieve it is because you choose not to. There should not be barriers. There should not be obstacles in your way. You should know how to get to where you want to be. There should never be a point that you can't achieve what you've set out to achieve. And then the second one is self-reliance. Being able to trust in your own judgment, having a strong sense of yourself, continuing to empower yourself and not relying on others, and having the conviction to achieve your goals. But this one even goes beyond that because this kind of self-reliance is what we see in leaders. It's what we see in the people who help guide others because they are so confident and sure of themselves and the path that they're on that they are able to help others reach that path as well. And that's what I really want. I want to teach people how to become more than just a member of a group, but how to lead a group, how to help others lead a group, how to become a group of leaders who can go out and achieve whatever they want to achieve. And lastly, tools for change. With knowledge of how the world works, with an understanding of what needs to change, and the critical thinking and foresight to implement that change, that's huge. But more than anything else, the wisdom to know how and when, knowing and understanding how your actions affect others around the world, and understanding how you can use those tools for change, but also understanding that sometimes change is not always the best thing. And this is really important because I think it comes down to that key point of understanding how things work so that you can do what you want to do without compromising yourself or others. And so that's kind of my overall philosophy, which wrapped up in a nutshell is really just to give students the most immersive journey that I can so that when they're done with this, they come out with a greater understanding of how they work, how the world works, and what they want to do with this world and this life that they've been given.